It's now my pleasure to introduce the first keynote speaker of the day, one of our international speakers. He's flown across the ditch, Professor David Lamb. So David's the Chief Scientist and Deputy CEO of Food Agility Cooperative Research in Australia. David is an interesting mix. He's a producer and a physicist, and has worked in precision agriculture for 30 years. He is presently Chief Scientist of Food Agility and Australian Cooperative Research Centre, focused on transforming the agri-food sector using the power of data and digital. He has co-designed more than 90 industry-funded R&D projects, and in addition to running the CRC's R&D portfolio, he also heads the AgTrace initiative in partnership with the Commonwealth Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestries. Passionate about reality-fueled agri-tech innovations on farm, he established the University of New England Smart Farm in 2007, and recently the Charles Sturt University Global Digital Farm Initiative. In the early 2000s, he established Australia's first badged tertiary course in precision agriculture, and in 2018 co-created Farm for the Future Pavilion at the Royal Sydney Show. He holds adjunct professor appointments at University of New England and Charles Sturt University. So David's been involved in this field obviously for many years, and we're looking forward to hearing from our colleague across the ditch. Thanks, David. It's a pleasure to welcome you here.
Good morning, everyone. That was excruciating. Thank you, Richard. It's lovely to be back again. I appreciate the invitation, Richard, you, Tanya, Rachel, and all the other prime movers of this amazing event. I really appreciate the chance to come back. I jumped at the cold call opportunity to return. Spend a bit of time on with some locals, hang out with the Gardines and a few others. So it's a privilege to be back, and for very good reason as well. So look, I've been asked to talk about the art of the possible, so you know who I am and what I do. Just to give you a bit of a Soldier's Five, Food Agility is a cooperative research centre. The CRC program has been running in Australia since about 1991. Basically, government puts some money on the table, effectively seed funding. A CRC forms itself, bids for the funding, facing industry-defined problems, and the pledge is to take that seed funding and leverage the heck out of it and deliver a whole raft of industry-led innovation projects. So, you know, for our organisation, we had $50 million on the table for 10 years. We've turned it into about 430 million of activity, and we also have an impact calculation that's run live as part of our ongoing reporting to Commonwealth, with an economic impact of about 6 billion. These are lofty numbers, and you know, when it comes to impact, it's always quite difficult to capture. But at the end of the day, the CRC program, there's 238 of them that's been funded since 1991, and there's 25 of them running live at the moment. So our focus is on the data and digital and agri-food production piece. Agility is in our name. It's a bit of a funky name because all of our projects are run using agile processes. So, you know, this is industry-led. We've got universities and research agencies involved, but industry's in charge, and that's absolutely important. They walk away with the IP. The universities, the agencies, you know, they build capacity around feeding the pipeline that's to generate the knowledge that's required. I'd also like to acknowledge up front, there are many of our partners that are behind the scenes of some of the things I'm going to share, so I'm certainly happy to take the credit for it, but I'm going to call it out straight away that all I'm doing is really articulating some of the wonder of other people's work. Well, who am I? When you're one of twins, farming's always going to be expensive, so I had my eye personally on flying fast jets. In the Air Force, of course, I got psyched out. I have no idea why. I'm a smart bloke. I'm told I am. But so I took myself off to uni and did a physics degree. Why? Because I wanted to get into the Air Force. At about year 2 of my degree, I fell in love with physics, got the bug, especially when it came to shooting arcs and sparks across rooms and carrying on. So plasma physics is my game, high voltage engineering if you like. And I'm still keeping that little dream alive on the side. To be honest, everything I've done in my 30 years was really about keeping myself in the lab with physics, but you know, look where I am. But I still have that little lab alive. If any of you have witnessed ball lightning, if you don't know what it is, don't worry. If you have seen it, you know what I'm talking about. I want to talk to you while I'm here as well, because it's an unknown mechanism. I've been chasing it for years and we're getting closer. And eyewitness accounts helps. Okay, when I emerged from my physics training, that was smack bang in the 1990s. You know, selective availability on global positioning systems. Of course, the US anchored navigation system was just being switched off. It was becoming available in the private sector. People started experimenting with putting yield monitors on harvesters to start measuring instantaneous grain yield whilst tracking the location of the harvester every odd second. There was technology that was being used in the military to detect unexploded ordnance, so-called electromagnetic induction devices, EM38s. For years, they've been filtering out all this noise to pick out the anomalies underground. We sort of stumbled on the fact that a lot of that noise is actually the variability in your soil. So EM38 became what is now a ubiquitous kind of technology for soil mapping in farming. In the mid-2000s, suddenly GPSs became smaller. They weren't the kind of brick. They were things you could put into chips, so they were going onto animals. We were all trying to connect our respective countries with national broadband networks. And of course, totally expected, rural and regional Australia was being left out of the equation, given that only 1% of mobile phone users live in the bush. So getting farms into the notion of, or engaged in the connectivity roadmap, and of course smart farms. Most recently, the beauty of physics, I've also been providing some minor technical support to a very talented scientist who happens to be my wife, who's putting devices on the back of animals and measuring methane in their breath plumes to understand what the methane footprint of our animals really are in extensive grazing systems. So it's fun, fun, fun. In the 2000s, I flew a small plane that was held together by sticks and sticky tape over the ditch, spent a wonderful 2 weeks trying to decode air traffic control language in the North Island as we were flying airborne video imagery of in the Bay of Plenty. And everything started getting smart. Smart fridges, smart homes, smart lawnmowers, and why not smart farms? And suddenly we were deploying technology on farms to connect things up. Cattle tracking, Sentinel camera systems for picking out wild dogs. That's a tens of millions of dollar problem for our sheep industry at home. Smart traps for pigs, of course, smart pastures and pasture sensing devices, virtual fences, beehives, farms. When I came here 10 years ago, had a wonderful field day on the Gardines property. We were issuing promissory notes about virtual fencing and cattle tracking and drones and so forth. And you look around today and they're here. And what are we talking about for tomorrow? Promissory notes are hard. You know, when I got the request to, you know, I'm coming and who's coming with me, I couldn't help think of the Tombstone movie, tell them I'm coming and hell's coming with me. But it's actually a much brighter message here. Really, the future is not so much the gadgets and the tech, because you see the fruits of labours around us today. It's a little more subtle. If we go back to 1901, a bunch of French artists got together and created drawings visualising the future in 100 years hence. And in 1901, this was the future of farming in the year 2000. And it was all being anchored by that wonderful new innovation of the era, which was electricity. You have your farmer pulling levers, you've got implements performing operations, all remotely, all tethered to and powered by this wonderful new innovation, electricity. And that was 1901. When you look now to more recent times, of course, that's exactly what we see. We have, of course, the JD GridCon, a 300 kilowatt machine that is literally tethered by an electrical cable, fully autonomous, chundering up and down the paddock, doing amazing things. So, we're not far from the truth. When you sit here today, or just a few years ago, and you map out what farming is going to look like in another 100 years' time, unlike the earlier postcard, this one we look at it and we pretty well understand exactly what we're looking at here. There's what is, in terms of branding, the ubiquitous drone, terrestrial fully autonomous vehicles. You've got supply chain, logistics, post-farm gate, renewable energy, all in the mix. And of course, you've got your farmer sitting there, no longer pulling levers. I'm not quite sure what he's pulling, but at the end of the day, he's controlling or being in touch with his farming operation from some central location. It's all nice AI-fueled iGrab, but the bit that you don't see, and that's where the real future is the emphasis on joining the dots and getting it all together. So it's not about the tech. The tech is out there creating enormous wealth of data and information, and is capable of conducting actions with the data. What we've got to do is join the dots and bring it all together. And so when we talk about joining the dots, the real hype at the moment is around the notion of digital twins, creating avatars that do things for and on behalf of us, creating three-dimensional or even four-dimensional rendering of our farming environment for some chip to kick in and make some decisions. But in a way, this is kind of the agri-porn of today, whereas the wonderful tech we see around us was agri-porn 14 years ago. What we're seeing here is just the pin-up childs of our future state. In order to be able to, in the top left, do a full three-dimensional rendering of your farm, what you're really doing it for is maybe in that case, you're looking at your above-ground carbon stocks, your above-ground biomass, or some other asset mapping. In the bottom left here, you've got live image stream that's being processed live to create effectively a thumbprint of a particular animal or group of animal, and it's the behavioural characteristics that are being generated from that could be put to work. In the right-hand side, of course, we're generating digital twins of very complex growing environments, such as our orchards, because we want to have intelligent spray applications. We want to understand exactly the microclimate live. We want to understand where the pest and disease entry points are, where the vectors come to play, so to speak, are. So digital twins and the visual kind of digital twins is all quite eye-catching. What's less eye-catching is the reality of where data can be brought together. And that's, you look at farm management tools. One of our projects, for example, with Partner AgriWeb, the good old farm management system that allows you to, manage your paddocks and so forth day to day. You start bringing together the historical and forecast weather. You bring together the actual algorithms behind your pasture growth rate in the middle on the left. You bring together the well-known livestock growth models now that have been developed by agencies both here in New Zealand and in Australia for many, many years. You bring together innovations in user experience and graphical interfaces. Of course, the growth in sustainability metrics and numbers that are appearing or requirements that are appearing, and effectively artificial intelligence, dare I say it, which is really just smart computing. I'd prefer to use smart computing, to be honest, but anyway, AI is what everyone talks about, is the capability to bring all of that together. So when you distill that down, you have a scenario here that you can make a natural language query of your system. I want to know, I have a target of 350 kilos that I want to hit between April, May. This is my mob size, this is my farm, how am I going to do it? And the answer comes back is, well, these are the paddocks you need to bring into rotation. That's the amount of time you keep your animals on those paddocks, because that's how the pasture's going to grow. That's your feed intake, that's your estimated conversion efficiency, and that's your weight gain. And there you know that you're going to fall within that target zone by about mid-April. 170 animals are going to hit that target. Now, that is not a cook-up. That is actually the way the system works. And it can even give you a verbal, plain English rendering, probably better than I just did, of course, just now. That is what is coming. in a way. It's just polishing up and the joining of the dots and the way we interact with it. And also, the data sources that are available now don't have to be all within one proprietary data house. You know, I mentioned earlier the ingesting of other data, and the dairy industry is a leader in that space, and the bringing together of your genetics records, your farm management software, and any other farm software that you have available, which is looking at the whole system, and the ultimate aim is to generate a per animal bespoke personalised treatment regime, whether it's for a medication, for example, or it's for some other process. But again, it's all subtle, it's there. The real key is in joining the dots. You mention artificial intelligence or this kind of the dot joining, and straight away you say, well, look, hang on, if I'm going to join this data, which is really private to me, and this data and bring it together, you know, how secure is that? And of course, AI and those processes absolutely rely on sweating data from external sources. And the trick then becomes is, well, how do you do that without compromising the security and privacy, all these walls between these various systems you're running, some of which could be extremely sensitive business data. But it's not only just your own data. We are coming to rely more and more heavily on other people's data as well, because we are part of a much larger system, just as others are relying on accessing ours. So how do we provide access to kind of the data that we understand is important for a system, but we also know is very important and private to ourselves? So, you know, AI is the ultimate in grave robbing device when it comes to data. But just to let you know, there are people out there in our, you know, in our wonderful Brains Trust or in our countries here that are looking right down in terms of cybersecurity, even down to the individual computer chip. So you take secure multi-party computation. Here's a classic example. Where you might have multiple producers with data that could be really handy to have in a regional ecosystem. And that data could be made available for computation, but what you don't want is for any fingers to go any deeper in the system. At the end of the day, there is capability now out there that from a cybersecurity space, that you're actually segmenting individual computer chips so that one part of a computer chip doesn't know what the other part's doing. It is literally like putting up a set of YARS on a single computer chip. So these are what these really intelligent people are doing in these really high-rise institutions in our city in IT, computing, data analytics space. But some of the real innovations aren't necessarily coming from high-rise people and high-rise buildings and people with massive heads. Look at drone innovations, and you see some of the wonderful examples of drone capability that is now on offer and in action in our sector. If you track it over time, my eye gets drawn to that little blip around 2012, 2013. We know there's been an exponential growth. It's tailed off at the moment, of course, because why? Because what we're seeing is that breath that's been taken, why these innovations are now being put to practical work, and the refinements are now occurring literally on farm within our production systems with the technology. But I always love that little blip at 2012, 2013. I was in the drone innovation game as a researcher myself. Always out there trawling around from the latest ideas of what the scientific community were doing. But I had my personal eureka moment in 2014 too, and right from this very region, pretty well at the same point of the blip. And I worked it out. When you look at the evolution of drones over that period of time, in around the end of the first decade in 2000s, farmers were grabbing it and running with it. In fact, in some respects, we're outstripping the geeks and the boffins who were back in the lab trying to work out clever things to do. And I had my own personal eureka moment as well.
A Southland farming family have employed a set of digital eyes to help keep track of their stock. They're using a remote-controlled drone fitted with cameras to fly over their large farm, counting sheep and looking out for problems. Dave Gooseling checked it out.
Getting around this 460-hectare farm in Western Southland can mean long days for the Gardine family. With over 4,000 sheep and cattle to look after, 13-year-old Mark suggested turning to technology.
Dad and I were watching TV and we saw the drones in Afghanistan for the military purposes, and we decided how we could use that in agriculture.
Their remote-controlled helicopter is fitted with 2 cameras. One feeds back live pictures through a set of goggles, the other records higher quality video for later.
We realise we've got smartphones, we've got a whole lot of computerised GPS stuff in the house, but we're still opening about 120 gates a day.
That's a 2-hour job during lambing season, opening and closing gates while driving around checking on stock.
And it's from a ground view, so we can often miss the stock that are in trouble. So by having an aerial view, or like a helicopter on the farm, that particular job is reduced down to 20 minutes.
The drone can be programmed to fly a specific route for regular jobs using Google Maps and GPS technology.
We need to count those hobbits to make sure they're all there.
They're able to count sheep by adapting software used to count penguins in Antarctica. But the drone is no toy. Their $4,000 investment could return them $50,000 a year in cost savings and productivity gains. Analysing daily grass growth is the next goal, information which could help increase lamb production and feed their bottom line. Dave Gooselink, 3 News.
So, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge Neil, who had absolutely no idea I was going to do that, but thanks for the permission in retrospect. But I put that up for a reason, because necessity still remains the mother of invention. And I've spent the last 10 years trying to crack that sheep game with drones. It's been pushed a little harder, thanks to innovations in image processing and imagery, again, fueled by AI, and also pasture biomass. You can do it. And thanks for the great idea, Neil. And thanks Southland. And this is my point. This is exactly the kind of place that dreams are made of. Really, our role is to grab it and run with it and see if we can leverage it for you. But beyond drones, telecommunications remains a big bugbear back home. I think it's no question, as a Starlink user, Starlink has made a huge difference to operations around the country. Do you mind me asking, who's got Starlink here? Yeah, okay. Okay, good one. Thank you. But I don't know about you, but it does still have its little blips from time to time, which is really quite annoying. But nonetheless, it's revolutionised the way we access the internet and devices on our property and in our kind of country. And the uplift in innovation, sort of very much leveraging off that. You know, back home we've got a lot of work that's going into extending Wi-Fi coverage out to kilometres. It's easy on flat country, but there's a lot of work going on vehicle-mounted antenna design to really give you that longer Wi-Fi booster coverage on hilly country as well. When you're talking Halo, a particular version of Wi-Fi, you're talking sort of video streaming at least over 1 kilometre. On flat country, you can push it out to 10 kilometres. That's one of the partners, Zedify, we're working with. But telecommunications remains a focus for us. Probably unsurprisingly, drones are playing a role in that. I don't know if you've got some experimentation going on here, but very much our emergency services, but now also our producers are really looking at these kind of solutions where you'll just dispatch a drone maybe 100 metres up on a tether. It will basically stay there for 12 hours. The tether's carrying the power to it. It'll stay there longer, but it's actually got underneath it a mobile cell. So you effectively created yourself a mobile cell tower of your very own. And they only pull it down every 12 hours just to make sure nothing's going to burn up on it, because you've got these motors chundering away for continuously. And the ground link, of course, is Starlink. So that's something that's grabbing people's interest. Drones again. We've got devices measuring things on our hilly country, short of having Starlink antennas on everything. If you can't get line of sight, then one of the alternatives, and one of our partners, Nippon Telephone Telegraph with University of Technology Sydney, flying drones around, literally harvesting data. They just go out every hour or so, pre-programmed, and just go and read the devices, meter readers, and come back home and download it and make it available. What's new and used for us? Sustainability is a real issue for us, and I've had some really interesting conversations with people today, but also yesterday, about this, what's going on here. Surprisingly, it seems methane and sustainability is really keeping our sector awake at the moment. The notion of sustainability credentials, lots of evidence that consumers are buying products with sustainability-related credentials. They prefer more focused claims, not environmentally friendly, but exactly what are you doing, around water quality or your deforestation status, for example. And there's evidence now in the market research that consumers are willing to prefer products with more and more of these specific claims attached to them. What we're finding also is that our retailers and those in the marketplace are now standing up commitments for and on behalf of our producers. But the real challenge to these large brands around the world is how you actually verify it, how you back it up, and how you make it stand up to audit. And now they're looking over their shoulder going, hang on, producers, we need to talk a little more about this. So that's a little bit of a worrying trend, that the claims are coming out faster than the kind of reality checks going on upstream where the food's coming from. But nonetheless, it's an opportunity as well. And in fact, we're already seeing challenges. Research out of the EU last year showed that up to 60% of sustainability claims are either false or misleading. And consumers are expecting integrity and will pay premiums not for the existence of a claim, but for confidence that they are genuine claims. And that's the point. So verification is absolutely important, and this is what's keeping our sector awake at the moment. Self-declaration of a particular statement is not necessarily the same as expressing validity or compliance. In other words, if you just tick a box to say, yep, I've done this on my farm or I've done this with my plants, that's not necessarily going to wash with consumers now. So when it comes to making and verifying claims, and this is following this whole data and joining the dots piece, data is going to be the key. The trick, of course, is you, the producers, hold all the cards because you hold all the data. And there are things like trust anchors out there that you're already participating in. Things like your NATE, for example, your business IDs, other indicators of where you are, who you are, and what you're doing. The trick is not to burden them by adding more layers of data reporting, but to tap into them, leverage the heck out of them. And so the movement that's taking off around the world now is the notion of, well, look, if you make a claim and if you have systems to verify it and make it robust in the face of audit, then the notion of a digital product passport. So basically stick those credentials or those claims in a passport, a digital passport that accompanies your product. So no matter where it is in the value chain, there are some credentials there that can be made available subject to permission of the data owner, whoever creates the data that goes in, and only available to those that authorise it. So it's very similar to the way a passport works. At the end of the day, if you hold the data, you hold the cards. Now, we already do this already, right? You've got your wallet on your phone, and in your wallet, you've got what we call light credentials. So in the middle there, for example, for me, I've got the old COVID certificate. That is as light as it gets, that top green one. That's just a tick and some number, which is really meaningless. That tick is as light as it gets. For me to travel internationally, I have an international COVID certificate. That's the blue one. That comes with a QR code. Now that QR code means that Passport Control or equivalent can actually interrogate it and get access to deeper layers of information. I've made my information available through the National Vaccine Registry by putting it or approving to have it shared there. You can only have certain authorities to see deeper in. Right? So my state, my existence, they're the kind of credentials that I carry with me. And of course I have my movement dockets, my boarding passes. And again, no one can scan a QR code on your boarding pass unless you're an airline and you have your airline check-in point. So these are examples of light credentials. Behind them are the competent authorities and the certifying agencies. And that passport, only certain things are made visible to the viewer. Some things you simply can't see beyond the green tick. But if you have the authority or you're the right person in the value chain or the right organisation, you can interrogate it. So let me give you an example. We recently completed a trial with the EU deforestation regulation. I'm going to wail about this a little later on in the workshop, but this is an example of a non-tariff trade barrier. At the end of the day, it's coming into force in December this year. And effectively, you have to certify that any red meat that's going into the EU has come from only non-deforested farms. Every farm that the animal has touched in its life has to be certified or validated as deforestation free. Now, over here you might have an average 1.8 movements for animals between birth and processing. In Australia it's more like 4. You know, you throw your calves, you wean them, you buy weaners, you background them, you might even have a second finishing step, and then into the feedlot if you're not a grass-fed only product, and then into the processor. You have to check and trace every one of those and check the status of them. So the trial that we completed was very much the digital product passport methodology, and that is effectively you may have your shipment. At the end of the day, it needs to be accompanied with a set of conformity credentials. You're going to need to involve third-party organisations in creating those credentials, in our case doing deforestation assessments on individual farms from which that particular meat came from. Now, if you swim upstream from a steak like that in Australia through the processor, given that you'll end up in a chiller with about 10 carcasses to pick from. That's where that meat will have come from. And of course, from those 10 carcasses, there's possibly 10 farms that they could have come from. So who's which? So the data traceability handshake is absolutely really important. And if you unpack a kind of an EU export scenario in our case, for that digital product passport to work, these are all the connections that you have to make in between. But we know it can be done, subject to making available access to the data, and obviously that data is only available if permitted to share by the owners. So to close out, what's coming? Not so much tech, in my personal opinion. You're seeing the wonder of it around the room and it's now in action. There'll be some nuancing and some fine-tuning as we go, but I don't see a huge amount of tech coming in the next 5 years that's going to make a difference other than what's in the pipeline. Only because I think the real emphasis, because of the market drivers that are out there and the compliance, regulatory and obviously market opportunities, is around joining the data dots. And that there will be an element of the notion of digital twins, but verifiable credentials and traceability digital product passports, I think, is the way to go. And remember, a take-home message here about data. If you're not paying for data, it generally means you are the data. So get used to thinking of data like you would a shuttle on the back of your ute or a 1-ton slab of fert on the back of your truck. Thanks very much.
Wait for Dave to turn his back on. Awesome, thank you very much, Dave. That was very insightful. So we've just got a few questions here for you, so we've just got a couple of minutes. So some people have sent them through on Slido. So quick question, what will quantum computing do to the rate of change?
Look, quantum computing is just is a super fast way of computing. You see some wonderful examples. This quantum computer will crack some unsolvable math problem in minutes that people haven't cracked in 150 years. And of course, it begs the question, well, if it's never cracked it, how do you know it's right in the first place? But no, quantum computing is just a way of fast-tracking the speed at which computer chips work. Of course, with AI, there's it's combinations of chips, so things will get faster. Your blink of an eye is going to be quite a little quicker.
These AI tools are only as good as the data they can access. Do we have the right data sets to be confident with the outcomes? Are there some missing?
Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty of data in terms of the kind of the sensor-generated data on the input side. There's not going to be a shortage of that, and of course the data warehouses you're sitting in. But the missing piece is the training data, and that's the decisions you make when faced with that data, because at the end of the day, that's all the AI wants to do, is to want to make similar decisions to what you made. In fact, AI, there is a whole new area of AI called cognitive AI. That is, you've got a machine that'll just add the ones and zeros and do things, but at the end of the day, what we want is a machine that'll do that, but make a decision like a human would based on those ones and zeros. So yes, what AI is struggling with are the recorded decisions that we make on farm when presented with that kind of data. And that's the real challenge. How do you get that? That's why natural language processing. Ring up a producer and say, look, this is your weather, this is your market, this is your availability of your trucks and your farm staff. what decision did you make? Well, I did blah, 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 blah. The natural language processing will render that into some data that can go into AI. So you're not going to get out of it easy. They're going to need you to help fill the gaps.
And one last question. What do you think the lowest hanging fruit for farming to utilise tech or data is to be more profitable?
Look, at the end of the day, labour units is the biggest cost still, certainly in our neck of the woods. And so, you know, when I look around, the sorts of things, the devices on cattle that'll tickle them to a milking shed for 8 o'clock in the morning, I've got a good memory, right? That'll tickle cattle into the shed, frees up that labour unit because they can be in the shed prepping up. Dare I say it, but the ones that allow you to look for your cast sheep and save you 3,000 gate openings a day, Neil, you cannot beat the simple tasks that take time and give you peace of mind. Checking things out remotely because you want to use your own eyes.
Awesome. Thank you very much, David. I have got a small gift here to say thank you.
Oh, thanks, Rachel. Thank you.
You can leave the stage.
Cool. Thank you.
Awesome. That is all from David this morning.